Hi, this is Shauna, the CEO and founder of Fuel Talent. One of the things I have loved most in my 25-year recruiting career has always been the stories that people tell. Stories of leadership, career choices, company ideas, and team building. My inspiration for starting the What Fuels You podcast came from being curious about people's lives and wanting to help share their stories. What path brought them to this place? What decisions did they make that led to failures and successes? Who influenced those decisions, and what lessons were learned along the way? I hope you enjoy the What Fuels You podcast. Today's guest on the What Fuels You podcast is Chirag Pancholi. Chirag is an experienced CEO, strategy executive, consultant, and FinTech Insure Tech founder. Currently, he is the co-founder of JennyLife, an innovative mobile-first life insurance provider geared towards empowering women and providing straightforward coverage and financial security. Prior to JennyLife, Chirag worked in investment banking for big names such as Goldman Sachs and the Federal Reserve Board. He holds an MBA strategy from the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, a Master's of Public Policy from Harvard University, and a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the University of Maryland. He went on to serve as strategy officer at Asurion, the world's largest handset insurance provider, where he witnessed how rewarding it was to help fix people's lives through insurance, and he's never looked back. Welcome, Chirag. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Sean.
Oh, good. Yeah, nice to see you. So I'm going to start with a little rapid fire, and I may change it up from what I had planned now that I've seen your guitar. Okay, first question. What's your favorite song or the first song you learned on your guitar?
So the first song I ever learned on my guitar was Crazy Train by Ozzy Osbourne.
Oh, nice. Awesome. That's not one that I would have expected. Ozzy Osbourne. That sounds like a hard one, too.
It is hard, but I was not very popular in school, so I didn't have any alternatives to all my free time.
Oh, we're going to get into this, like quote unquote popular. What is your guilty pleasure? That could be food or way you like to spend time or bad habit.
Yeah, I think my guilty pleasure is literally hiding away from my children and my wife to actually play this Jackson guitar behind me.
Oh, nice. That's a fun guilty pleasure. It's supposed to be very relaxing. My husband loves his guitar, and especially when actually do not like it when he plugs it into the what's the thing called, what's the thing that makes it really loud?
Yeah, the amplifier. Sure.
The amplifier. I'm like, turn that thing off. I like a little acoustic guitar.
Sure.
Are you? I'm guessing I know the answer to this, but are you more spontaneous or more of a planner?
Oh boy, I ride my snowboard goofy-footed, if you know what that means. It's,
Yes.
I'm right-handed, but I actually go the other way, so I'm kind of an oddity in that when that comes to it. I am spontaneous, sprinkled. How do I do it? I'm a pizza crust of well-planning with sprinkling of spontaneity, if that makes any sense.
Totally. You like some structure to your spontaneity.
Yeah, I do think creativity can come from a bedrock of some structure.
Yeah, I like that. What's the best or your most favorite concert that you've ever attended?
So I went to go see. I'm a former headbanger.
Oh, did you have long hair and stuff?
I tried it. I had a mullet back in the 80s, 90s. And I did have an Iron Maiden decaled jean jacket. And so, yes. And there are pictures on the internet, I'm sure. Or actually, not. This is pre-internet, so I'm sure there's some
geez.
out there. But I went to see Aerosmith with a hair metal band, I believe, Motley Crue, a long time ago. It was the loudest thing I had ever heard in my entire life. But it was just the most amazing experience because of the vitality and the energy was just, it saturated the environment. And I had never experienced that before in my life.
Yeah, it sounds fun. What is your morning ritual?
My morning ritual is pretty straightforward. I'm fairly an early riser by choice. I like the calmness of the home while I make my coffee. And I like to know that my family and my children are sleeping. It gives me a sense of security and purpose. but I need my coffee fix immediately, and I like to have it at my pace and my time and temperature. So I make my coffee, get ready for my wife, and then I get about 10 to 15 minutes of quiet solitude of just staring out at my backyard, my garden, and then the day starts and it's 0 to 60. So that 15 minutes is just sort of that time for pensive calibration.
Yeah, I like it. I feel like obviously now we're in a digital time in the world, and so everything coming at us is all these messaging things of like how to live a better life and all the shoulds. And there's a lot of talk around morning ritual and kind of that peace and quiet. And I find that a lot of CEOs and people who are running busy lives really appreciate that quiet time, so they can almost like set the tone for their day of feeling in control. So that I like that. How do you take your coffee?
Straight, black with no additives whatsoever. I need the full octane, so mine tends to be a little bit sludgy, if you will.
Oh, yeah, like a Turkish coffee?
Yeah, it's very thick, thicker than usual, from Starbucks, for example. And because I just need the octane.
Yeah, I get it. I'm a coffee girl, so I get it. What's your dream vacation?
My dream vacation is pretty straightforward.
Like, are we beach? Are we mountains?
I'm a mountain guy. I like solitude because, as you know, Shauna, running organizations and motivating people and trying to make positive change is a really strong. It's a hard job. One we love very much. Wouldn't change it for the world. But having that quiet solitude of just hiking the mountains and seeing a line of sight of some snow-capped peaks, maybe seeing a caribou or reindeer is really interesting. Always have my bear spray handy with me because I go hiking where there are bears out in Pacific Northwest as well as Canada and Montana. And so I really enjoy just being detached from electronic encumbrances.
Yeah, and it's a forced connection, and hopefully you're going to raise your kids to also be in the great outdoors with you, because it's like you'll realize as they get older, it's like, oh no, I got them captured and captive with no technology, which is rare these days. What is one of the qualities about you that people would be surprised to learn or maybe just underestimate?
Yeah, that's interesting. I am actually quite tolerant of various different viewpoints. People assume that as type A's, as leaders of organizations and type A individuals, that our North Star is very immovable or
that you're rigid or something.
Rigid, right? It's not flexible. And I think, that Bruce Lee, a former Seattle native here, resident, said something, be the water. And you may have heard this, be the water. Water can be still or it can be thunderous and crashing. It can fill any shaped vessel, but it might be amorphous at the same time. And so I really like that notion of that. And I think leadership should be like that. It is water. It can be thunderous and it can also be soothing and nourishing. And I think for me, people sometimes assume that I'm very high paced and very focused on the mission, would assume that, our tolerance of flexibility is very measured in millimeters, but it's really not. And I think that that's sort of the way people would be surprised to see that I am fairly facile with understanding, appreciating different viewpoints.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're saying that even right now. I love, love, love that answer. But especially right now, just even in our country, as we, today is, what is today? It's October 16th. So we're a few weeks out like from the election, and you just find that it's just, for me, the craziest time ever to be alive and in our country, when it almost feels like people are just so intolerant and so not flexible to hear and learn and grow from different opinions. And I know that you're talking about it in the context of business, but I think it can be applied everywhere. And it's a great trait to have. And it's always the person that you want leading and at the dinner table, just everywhere. It's great.
And you know what? I can't take ownership for that viewpoint. I actually read a book by James Clear, Clear is his last name, James Clear. He wrote a great book. He's one of these great people who's an author, thoughtful, just a swell guy to look at. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits. And And I recommend people read it, particularly in this time of flux and consternation. I think it's important. One of the key tenets he mentioned there in Atomic Habits is, you can change minds by being friendly and having proximity. And that's why when we say, hey, let's have dinner together, let's have coffee together, that sort of proximity does remove barriers and barbed wire that people would assume that they would have. So, I love to talk to people and say, you know what, why don't you sit down with me? Let's have breakfast together. Let's have lunch together. It's on me. And that it seems very sort of,
like a lost art.
Yeah, it's like a lost art, but it's kind of like, oh, of course that would work. But when you really think about it, how many times do we battle people, or we've seen people battle each other on social media or on mass media?
That's ridiculous. Yeah.
It's ridiculous. First of all, you're 3,000 miles away. You're talking to an electronic device. You're not together in the room. Let's sit down together and have a cup of coffee and some Danishes together. And that proximity does help. And I think so. Any outlook I have is really just guided by James Clear and a book.
I'm gonna read it. Thank you for the suggestion. So you started talking in the beginning about your childhood and coming from humble beginnings. Where were you born and where did you grow up? Tell me about your childhood.
Sure. I was born in India, northwest India, a state called Gujarat. My parents, we emigrated here with, typical $18 to their name sort of thing. My dad had come here first, and he had somewhat stabilized, and he brought us, my mom and my sister and myself over. I think I was 4 or 5 years old, very young. And we, of course, were red-blooded citizens, American, I believe, red, white, and blue. And so, growing up, through Section 8 housing, it's an interesting experience.
Where did you grow up?
Washington, D.C.
Okay.
Back in the early 80s and mid 80s. It was an interesting time. It's not what it is now. Now it's very beautiful and gentrified. And before, Washington, D.C. was not so appealing, particularly after 5 o'clock at night. And so, humble beginnings, typical immigrant story, Asian immigrant story, got to work hard. My dad had 2 jobs. My mom had 2 jobs. She was a short order cook at an Indian restaurant on the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and she had her assembly line job in the 80s. It's all she could get. It's all my parents could get. And so from very on, we were latchkey kids. I mean,
And were they educated?
My father was an accountant, chartered accountant, and immigration nowadays is easier because of the democratization of information, just basic information like how to get to a particular street, what are the different routes, what bus schedule is there. If you imagine yourself before mobile phones and before internet, finding out, in a different town, even 20 miles away, would be very difficult to find out.
Well, and then there's language barriers.
And there are language barriers. Thankfully, my father spoke excellent English as an educated man, but my mom was not as much. And so, when you think about the immigrant experience now, although none of them are easy, oftentimes, it's easier to on-ramp into our American social fabric than it was previously. And that's simply because technology and sophistication of information dissemination. So humble background, Section 8 housing, saved up every penny. Fun fact, we never celebrated Christmas, not because we didn't like Christmas or anything, just didn't have any money. It's just simple.
And how was money, kind of, how do I put this? Like, how was it described to you, or how did money show up for you as a value when you were a child? Was it like, oh, when I get money, I'll be this, or I am focused on money, or did they reshape it? I've interviewed a lot of people on the podcast, particularly, who have really crushed it. Several of whom had parents who kind of changed the script almost to make them believe that they were full of riches because they had, love, or, because one guy was telling me that his mom was a waitress and would bring home food and present it in a way that was beautiful. So he felt that it was, that they weren't poor, but he looks back, he's like, oh my God, we were really poor. Like, wow.
Yeah, it's consistent. I don't think that we looked at money as like an objective. It was not even described as a tool. Money as a pecuniary device is sort of an abstract artifact anyways, for civilizations, and even more so in digital money. but it was really the fact that you could control your own destiny by employing your, assets that you have and
Mm.
doing something with yourself. I think the idea of success is really a byproduct of actually employing your talents or passions or understanding what people need and then deploying your passions and talents to serve that need. And if it's at scale, and you can do it at scale, then you have scalability of your contributions to society. But then thereafter, the byproduct could be paper wealth or actual wealth or
Mm-hmm.
notoriety, etc. And
Yeah.
so I think for my parents, it wasn't like, get money. It was kind of like typical, be a doctor, engineer, lawyer, real
Right.
straightforward. There's only three things you could be. Anything outside of that, you're a failure in Indian American society
Well, we're
generally.
Jewish, so it's the same. It's the same
Yeah,
messaging. It's like, and
right?
was there pressure for you to stay in the community? Did they find an Indian community, or were there not a lot of Indian families to relate to, like in grade school?
Yeah, I think that there weren't that many. I was the only American of Indian descent of background in my middle school. I think most of high school, there was two other people, I think, in a class of 400. Um, so there weren't that many comparables to me,
Mm-hmm.
certainly in the early to mid 80s. Indian Americans, there aren't that many in the United States to begin with. There weren't certainly that many in the early to mid 80s. And so therefore, it was sort of that army of one, like, hey, it's just me,
Mm.
I have to be the best I can be, not because people are seeing me as that one person who's different than everybody else who's 98% white. My best friends were Jewish Americans, Israeli Americans, and a lot of shared traits between the two segments.
For
Um,
sure. For sure.
Humility and just focus and doing well, doing good kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think
Education being a strong
absolutely,
value, food.
absolutely, food, of course, yes.
And what about marrying within the tribe? Is that a message?
No, I think that perhaps that may be over amplified than it really is. I think most cognizant families who understand that societies move, there's emigration, and the soul of a person and the quality of that person is more important than anything else.
Oh, for
I
sure.
just love the fact that our country is such a melting pot. I mean, I love it. I mean, we have a African American, half Indian American vice presidential candidate. It's
Mm-hmm.
just like
Mm-hmm.
wow. Before that, was a half white, half black president of the United States twice over, right?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, where else in the world can you do it than here?
Mm-hmm.
And so, obviously, really excited about what we're doing here in our country. It's not the best country in the world. I mean, we always have, it's arrogant for us to say we're the best country in the world,
Right.
but it's a
Sounds like
great,
everybody's trying to improve and trying to
right, we're
grow,
trying to
and
improve.
yeah,
And
hopefully
but yeah,
the values of continuing to include and realize what we've gained from all of the incredible
absolutely, absolutely,
people who have come to our country and made it what it is. So
absolutely.
you talked about being a latchkey kid. Was there anyone, like, who did you have to kind of ultimately grasp onto to influence you? Because obviously it's not a small feat to end up at University of Maryland studying engineering. If your parents aren't around to kind of give you all of the support and guidance and money to make that happen, how did you end up there?
Yeah, so I'll say something that is probably not usually said. I didn't have any uh, mentors. I didn't have any examples. Literally, I had none. I
Teachers,
know
no
that.
teachers, no
No, I mean,
coaches.
no coaches. I didn't play any sports because we didn't have any money to do sports. Although I did play lacrosse in high school and then subsequently but that's just out of my own volition. So I know it sounds strange because you heard these podcasts and interviews, people like, well, I met this one person and she changed my life or he changed my life. I quite frankly, I hadn't, and I don't know what that speaks, what that means, but I just found my own way. Quite honestly, I would just watch other people's behavior, their actions, and just suss out patterns, if you will. I recognize patterns. I think that's my sort of hidden talent is I could see patterns.
Mm. Do you have an example of that? Because I love that.
Yeah, it's So, for example, a pattern I learned that was one of my classmates who was just killing it on in grammar, and in these classes, and he was really smart. But how his modus operandi day to day after school and on the weekend was something I never knew was possible. You know, he said, oh, on Friday nights or Friday after Friday, I go to the library
Mm.
and I do all my homework on a Friday afternoon. And that way I have my whole weekend to goof off. And I don't have that dreaded Sunday night feeling of like, oh my gosh, I have so much homework to do. I don't know if I'll get it done before 7:05, in the morning on Monday. And it just never dawned on me that, yes, I could go to the library at 3:05 p.m.
Yeah.
Walk over and write down. It was that sort of like, aha. So that's one pattern. And then another pattern, was a friend of mine, and she was like, had this Trapper Keeper. I don't know if you use Trapper Keeper.
I remember those. Oh my gosh, you just took me back. The Trapper Keeper. I love the Trapper Keeper.
She had the Trapper Keeper with the cute puppies on it, and I remember thinking, like, oh, that's so cute. She's a dear friend, classmate back then. And she had Trapper Keeper, and her things were organized. She would actually write down her homework assignments from every class that was due. And I didn't think, it never occurred to me that I could have a notebook and I could write down my to-do list. I would just keep it in my brain. I would just lock it in there, and I would just repeat it and repeat it and repeat it on the bus ride. Like, okay, I need to do this for English. I need to do this for, pre-cal. I need to do this. And invariably humans are imperfect. And so you'd once in a while, no matter how regimented you are, you'd forget something and you'd feel awfully like, oh my gosh, I forgot to do the diorama. Like,
those are good habits. So organization and like sense of urgency, not procrastinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember what you wanted to be when you grew up at that age, like in high school? What were you thinking about besides girls?
I didn't really, I was not a very good looking person there. I don't think I am either now, but I don't think that was really in my universe, quite honestly. Obvious, besides the fact that there's biological driver, of course, those are always there. But even a nerd wants to have a girlfriend, kind of thing, right? Even a nerd, like the nerdiest of nerds wants to have a girlfriend. But it was tamped down by the simple fact that I was just a complete nerd. Like I was just like, and so therefore for me, I just was like, wow, I'd just be a scientist of some kind,
Oh, a scientist.
Just solve basic problems like how do we do cold fusion, and then maybe if I was a physicist, they'd send me up on a rocket and try to do experiments up there in space. And so that was sort of, this is, the shuttle, sort of the late 80s, early 90s. And it's just like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do,
Yeah. Did you go to your 20-year high school reunion?
I didn't. I didn't make it out because I'm on the West Coast by then. And I just couldn't, make it out.
But would these people, if you went to high school, would they be surprised to see where you've come? Or did you always have, even if you were a nerd or maybe a scientist or whatever you're defining yourself to be, did you always have drive?
I think so. I've always had drive because, I started working when I was 11 years old. I think it's illegal to employ someone at 11. I don't think you could do it at 11. But I had my first paper route at 11. And I remember to this day because I grew up in DC and Maryland suburbs eventually. And the truck would come and deliver newspapers bundles at our driveway at like 4:30 in the morning. And you would hear it because it would be a big thud, outside your house. And then I'd get up, at 4:30 and I just, clip the binders. And then I'd take the newspapers and put them in a rubber band, put them in my satchel, ride my Huffy bike. And I had memorized all the house names in this, 400 house, 500 house route or whatever it was. And I just drop them off. Come rain, sleet, snow, hail, whatever. Like, it was morning. I was like, I got to do this. People need to read their newspaper. It was one of these things like, I can't, this is before CNN and everything else really took off. And so I remember doing that at 4:45, 5 in the morning, even if it was cold and without coffee. And so by the time I get to school, I'd be tired, but it is what it is. You just plot.
Yeah, you've got that inner drive. That's awesome.
You gotta do it.
So it's so interesting because in researching you and learning more about you, obviously you're highly educated. Was the pursuit of, Harvard and University of Chicago, the Booth School, like, were these necessities to continue on your path, or were you like, I'm not quite sure what I want to do, so I should probably just get more education?
That's a great question. I think many people tend to pursue medals of achievement because the medals are shiny and they can brag about them. sort of
Well,
humble brag.
they help your resume too. As a recruiter, I'm like, oh, it doesn't
Yeah,
hurt that if I'm like on LinkedIn and I'm
sure,
typing in, Harvard or University of
sure.
Chicago.
I think for me, it was, I had this notion that, after graduating undergraduate school, I knew that I wanted to be a leader of some kind. And then so I just assessed what types of experiences and education does a well-rounded, inspirational leader, dare I say, that I would like to become someday, what kind of background would they need to have? So
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost, I always thought that science would be important. It's a sort of a bedrock because it creates a logical thinking
For
apparatus,
sure.
right? It's
Yeah.
just like test, controls, variables. It's just structured thinking. Because if you don't have structured thinking, then you can kind of get distracted, if you
Oh,
will.
yeah.
And that's not to say that liberal arts aren't worth it. I actually, now in my old age, I actually think liberal arts are even more valuable than quant and math. Quite honestly, I think I might be iconoclastic in that. I think the STEM thing's a little overdone. I would actually see humanities as actually very inspirational. And as an aside, some of the best software developers, for example, that I've ever met and had the pleasure of working with were actually not STEM folks traditionally. They're
Oh,
philosophers.
interesting. I mean,
They're
you could
philosophers.
help me in my business if you could just like we could put that on the megaphone. You could tell all my clients like you don't need Carnegie Mellon computer
You
science.
don't. You don't. Some of the best are self-taught anthropologists and
Yeah.
philosophy majors because they just think intuitively differently than the traditional Carnegie Mellon or Stanford or MIT kind of route. And so I looked at myself, I said, well, if I want to be a well-balanced, thoughtful leader at some point, I need to have that. And then I knew business was something that I was naturally drawn to because it's somewhat simple in a sense, somewhat simple. Now, everybody knows business is incredibly complicated to do well at scale. But then I also knew that I needed a regulatory framework as well because I think virtually every industry is regulated by
Mm,
some entity or somebody. And
yeah.
so therefore I knew that I needed to go get the top-notch public policy background. I needed to get the best business schooling I could find,
Mm.
which I believe is University of Chicago. They're all the same, all the top five, whatever, or they're always moving around, but I think they're really great. Um, and I had already gone to Harvard for my graduate program, so I didn't want to go to Harvard again for another degree. Just too much double downing of the same environment and thinking. So I
Yeah.
wanted to branch out and find a comparable school. And so University of Chicago was just an amazing institution. I highly
Yeah.
recommend it. And then
That's
I'm a state
awesome.
school guy from the University of Maryland, so I loved it. So that was it, enough schooling. But I think some of the smartest people I ever met never stepped foot in college. Quite
Yeah.
honestly,
You can get to the same destination with lots of different paths, definitely. But I would actually argue that just because I've done this for so long,
sure.
I think obviously it can't hurt all the education that you've had, but also
Yes.
really the investment banking, how to
Yes.
look at deal flow, how to analyze deals and companies. How did you end up in that? Did you get recruited out of school?
Yeah, so I went to work for Goldman after I did a stint in consulting, strategy consulting. They're very synonymous, comparable kind of, or adjacent types of roles. Consultants become bankers, bankers become consultants. Um, and so I was recruited by Goldman Sachs. Just spent a little bit of time there. This is 2001. So we know what happened in 2001. So I was in investment banking at 85 Broad Street, which was their tower back in the day. They've since moved since then. And I enjoyed my time in banking. It was great. I remember it clearly, waking up, getting to the office at 8 and taking the car service back at 4 in the morning and rinse repeat, basically ad infinitum if I could tolerate it. And the treat was like, hey, I get a Lincoln Town Car driving me home. It's like, yeah, but you're driving home at 3 in the morning. And you're going to repeat, take the subway in at 8 in the morning
Yeah,
uh,
that's a
downtown.
lot. That's a lot.
Yeah, I think it's good training because it tells you how hard you can work.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I
I've
think
had a
that's
few friends. I did a lot of recruiting for investment bankers in New York. And then I've had a few people on the podcast who talk about it. They're like, yeah, I slept under my desk. And that was normal. And, just the
yep,
ordering in and lots of partying from what I've been
yep,
told.
sure. You got to have
Um, you got to have the balance, but like you looking back going, I don't know how I actually survived those years is kind of crazy. But what a great foundation. And you've got some, I'm sure just huge network from all of these different, schools and just companies, all incredible that you can tap into as you started to think about. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to JennyLife because I want to obviously get to that. We could talk all day. You're super fun. But as you went to go start to think about, creating a startup, like tell me about the idea. I know that your wife, Jenny, was formidable in that whole decision through a conversation that you had is what I read.
Yep.
Tell me, take us back to that conversation.
Yeah. So I love how you said my wife is formidable. She is very formidable. And when you meet her, you'll she's got that
happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, she's a force for sure, in a good way. So my wife and I were walking in our neighborhood here, and we had our newborn daughter, and we were trying to help her go to sleep. And then we were having this conversation around, what happens if something happens to me? What happens if something happens to you? What do you do? As military training tells you like how to have stored procedures, if you will, not technical stored procedures as developers, but like, checklists and items you just kind of know how to do. You just do it.
Yeah.
And so, hey, look, if something happens, you don't have to time for emotion. You just have to execute, and don't worry about anything else. And so we got into conversations around financial products and service. And I said, hey, I have life insurance, so you'll be good to go, Jen. And she said, well, what's life insurance? And as an insurance guy, I was like, wait, excuse me? How could the wife of, all I do is talk about my work all day long, when I'm at home, I should say. And she said, I don't know what life insurance is. And so I explained it to her and she's like, oh, okay, that seems like a great product. I'm like, yeah, you do not know about it? She's like, no, I have no idea what that is. And then so we were doing laps around the lake and she said, well, let me go get life insurance. And then she went through the process. It was not fun necessarily, and it was too arduous. And she turned to me and she said, you know what? I'm a fairly educated, middle of the road American woman. And if I don't know what it is, I bet you 28 million, or I bet you, well, that's the number but that we know now, but I bet you lots of people don't know about this. And if it's economical, we should probably solve for this problem. And she knows that I love starting, businesses or projects. And she's like, you'd be perfect to do this, as an insurance guy. And so we humbly started it. And she said, you know what, you could probably name the company after me too, and that was her thing, I was like, sure. I was like, yeah, I'll think about it. And then I got some information from my friends at McKinsey and some other consulting firm. And we looked at some data sets and, because for me, it's both qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah.
It's top down and bottom up. So you can see how my brain works. I'm like, it's comprehensive, mutually exclusive, cumulatively exhaustive. That's an acronym that oftentimes consultants use, like, basically a totality of information as much as you can, and then digest it, synthesize it. And so we looked at the data, and of course the normal origin story is very important because we're all human. And so humbly we started with that. And so at my wife's behest, she said, you should start solving for this problem now. And she's right. Her intuition is spot on because women are the CEOs of families. Whether people recognize that or not, they're the chief executive officers of families. They're the long pole in the tent that keeps a family afloat. If something happens to her, the family has a hard time stabilizing.
Absolutely. And so was this just a miss for other competitors? Or is this a thing that you have to tell me, is this, and this is me actually asking as a woman and not as a CEO woman where that would actually impact financially the business, the family also. But just as a woman and a mother of three, is this something where you have to brand it differently to try to target women or is it an actual different type of offering? Or just more accessible, or how's the differentiation come out in the world?
Yeah, so it's all of that plus more. I will tell you that historically, it was actually illegal for women to have life insurance, believe it or not. Believe it or not, until the women's suffragist movement and sort of this, this empowerment movement that started with Betty Friedan and with the feminine mystique and the voters' rights demonstrations, it was actually illegal for women to even actually have life insurance. Hard to believe. In America it was. And so if you start from that origin, then it brings us here. It's like, well, how can that have been? So let's solve for that.
Right.
The industry has overlooked, and again, I'm an insurance guy, so it's instantly going to go to insurance industry stuff, and please pull me back. But for the sake of our audience's delight, let's just bring it back to something more
Yeah,
attainable.
I know. I need to learn.
It's the insurance industry typically, and financial services writ large, have focused on the male breadwinner archetype. The traditional male breadwinner. He's the one that needs insurance. He's the one that we should spend time educating about risk management for the family or financial asset management. And the woman was always sort of as an aside, like, oh, can I translate this for you, kind of thing, sort of dismissive, if you will, or at the very least, ignoring that, thing. And you can't really clap with one hand. You need two hands to clap.
Absolutely.
Right? Why only have insurance and financial services geared towards one hand? Why not the other hand as well? And if you have a family that has a traditional two-person family, two guardian family, let's just say, and to have a resonant clap, you have to have both parties respected.
Yeah.
And so we looked at that and said, it's a matter of respect first and foremost. It's a matter of recognition. It's a matter of accessibility. It's a matter of price. And then it's a matter of positioning. So when you say which one of these, it's a composite. It's all of that. For example, women have a pink tax, right? Women pay more for so many items that just are astonishing. Dry cleaning, it's crazy. Moreover, the pink tax is associated with the fact that there's products and services that they absolutely should have that are ignored by the industry or have been traditionally.
What types of products and services? And that's my first question. And I don't want to forget my second one, but it's around philosophy of, are you finding at a dinner party or a cocktail party, when you describe what you do, that people have a quick, like, oh, I don't believe in life insurance, or I'm all about life insurance. I find that, like, we're big life insurance people. Yeah. But we have friends who don't have any life insurance. So, like, that's just not our thing.
Yeah, that's scary.
It is scary.
That's scary.
It's a scary thing.
Well, so it's interesting. So when you say it's a composite, why has no one created an insurance company for women? And it's one of those simple questions like your child asks you, like, real, why is the sky blue? Well, you kind of have to look it up on Wikipedia, or you kind of have to open up your textbook to be like, oh, right, it's the chemical composition, the soup in the atmosphere, and bends the light, and it looks blue, and et cetera, et cetera. Great, I get it. The simplest reason is people did not care. The insurance industry, financial services, didn't care about servicing the unique needs of moms and women. Simply put. And I know that's a broad brush, and some people say, oh, back in my day, we did, pamphlets for women. I'm like, yeah, but that's not in earnest, and that's not holistic, and that's not with focus, So we humbly started this company with my wife, and she's not a startup person, so she's not on the team in that sense, day to day, but she's very much involved. And so I think that's how we started it. And so you asked a question.
Did you bootstrap it, or how did you?
Yeah, so we bootstrapped it with our own personal savings, and then we raised some VC. It was very important for us to raise venture capital from the industry itself. And that might be really iconoclastic or odd to say that. Well, the reason why we methodically pursued the right types of financial investors in our mission is because insurance and financial services is very complicated, state by state, federal, state levels, and sometimes even local in certain circumstances. And so if you think about it, we wanted to make sure that if we were going to build a transformative, generationally beneficial branded company, we wanted to make sure that we had investors from the very early on from the industry that understood what we were trying to solve for.
That makes sense.
It's one thing to take VC money from Andreessen Horowitz or Madrona or other places who don't have that technical expertise about compliance and regulatory matters from the industry. It's very different to get it from the industry corporate venture capital.
Absolutely. So how much have you raised?
We raised across 2 rounds only $5 million. And I say only because nowadays there's massive mega.
Well, yeah, but you also don't want to raise more than you need and have to deal with all the dilution,
Exactly. It's one of these things where I think Rockefeller did this thing where I believe he started it, John Rockefeller, when he would donate money to certain causes. He would ask them, well, how much do you need? They'd say, well, we need, $100,000 to build this library in Cleveland or Cincinnati or what have you. And he said, well, I'll give you 90,000. You guys have to raise the other 10,000, because there's that sort of motivational factor of like staying lean and staying focused.
Right.
And so therefore we deliberately, our two-pronged strategy was get the industry involved from day one, because they created the mess. They should be part of the solution. And we want to learn from them. Like, what were their assumptions that are faulty that we can clearly outline? And
they've obviously learned something from this.
Exactly. And then the other thing is that they have insights that traditional financial venture capital investors might necessarily not have. And what also happens is it de-risks subsequent rounds. What I mean by this is investors, this is the hardest lesson I ever learned when I first started my first company, which was, so much learnings. I thought venture investors were risk takers. Like, oh, of course you want to invest in this. Of course, I don't know what my monetization is going to be. That's why you're a venture investor. You're not a sure thing investor, right? Well, it turns out they're not risk takers. They want to de-risk as much as possible. Absolutely logical and reasonable now in retrospect, being in the industry, in the trenches for almost 12, 14 years now across multiple companies. And so what we wanted to do was make sure that our subsequent investors who are going to put a lot more money into the company knew that the industry was already supporting this innovation. Right? We're not disrupting anything. We're innovating. You know, I often tell my teammates, like, 21-year-olds want to disrupt industries. 41-year-olds want to innovate industries.
Absolutely. And how many employees do you have at this point?
We have, we're about 20 right now, fully loaded across all types of employment. And so we're scrappy. We raise a little bit of money. We're revenue positive. We're growing at, I want to say like 200 some odd percent a month over month. When you normalize against COVID-19 perturbation, we're growing. So if we normalize against that, we're growing at triple month over month. And that's just simply because my teammates are absolutely amazing.
Good for you. Yeah. How has the pandemic impacted your business?
So people's understanding of mortality, as odd as it may sound, in normal days outside of COVID-19 are not there. People don't think about mortality. They just don't. They're like, oh, I'm going to live forever. Of course I'm going to live forever. Like me, I'm doing yoga today, and then I'm doing fasting, intermittent fasting. They just think they're going to have this. This is false. There's nothing in the universe that lasts forever. We don't even know if the universe will last forever, quite honestly. And so COVID-19 has only done one thing, which is cause people to think about on a daily basis, oh goodness, what if I die? Or how do I ameliorate the impacts of death? And to that extent, it does help our category. Quite honestly, it does. Because
of course, I was thinking you must be on fire because people are like, oh shit, I need to get and also people having time. I'm hearing a lot of people say, I got my will together, that this like to-do list of like, oh, I need to scrub my kind of basic paperwork and get it all up to date.
Absolutely. You'd be shocked at how little preparation fellow Americans like ourselves have. So little preparation. And I think that we're working on a lot of different areas to work on those things. We'll have new products being rolled out fairly soon around some of these things. And so we basically started the company with that. And then the way we created our company was we didn't want to just sell products. We didn't just want to be a shill like, oh, there's a company created with a nifty website and a nifty app and it's just selling the same old thing. It's not. What we did was something different, Sean. We said, look, we're focusing on moms and women. She's in the center. Everything that we build for her, whether it's a paid product, whether it's a free product, whether it's a freemium model, has to be supportive of her life. So we have an ecosystem strategy, if you will. We want to have an ecosystem of products that are priced or free or somewhere in the spectrum that intuitively can help the mom with their day-to-day life. What we mean by that is we launched the first vaccination app ever. So right now, JennyVax is a vaccination app that consumers can download for free and store their vaccination records for their entire family on a HIPAA compliant software and the whole bit. Such that now you don't have to go fetch, in your pencil drawer upstairs or call the, pediatrician to get your vaccination records for your child.
This is so funny because as a mother of 3 who's like, oh, they're going back to camp. Now I need to go call and be like, when was their last chickenpox vax? When is it? I always have to deal. And I'm like, this is so inefficient. Can't somebody solve for this? Good job. Yay, you.
Thanks. It's in beta right now. It's live. You can download it. You can play with it. Give us feedback. How can we make it better for you? Like, we launched that, and it's free. We don't make any money out of it. As a matter of fact, it costs us money, right? The reason why we did this is because that was one of our ways we could show the world that we mean what our vision is. Sometimes companies have visions, but they don't really have exhibitions of proof points of that vision.
Mm-hmm.
Our vision was, we're taking care of mom. We're trying to simplify our life. Our motto is life uncomplicated.
I like that.
We have a primary research panel of moms that we routinely just ask, survey, like, hey, what keeps you up at night? What did you worry about on Friday? What did you eat on Thursday? What is your life like now, or has it been improved? We learned a lot from that. And so a lot of mothers were like, you know what, summer's coming up and I got to send my kid to this camp, or I'm going to send him to Uncle Joe's, cabin in Utah, but I need to make sure my vaccinations are up to date. And they're like, gee, it'd be great if we didn't have to deal with paper stuff. And we're like, tell us more. So we use that to develop new products. And frankly, JennyVax is live on both Android and iOS. And it's just a way for families to just download or just take a picture of your vaccination record, enter it, and it's stored. And you can share it and control who you want that vaccination information to go to. So now, for the first time in humanity, I dare say, you can literally text message or email on your iPhone your vaccination records for anyone in your family to anyone in the world you want to. And
That's
you can control
great.
permission. So you can say, you know what, you can control permissions. That's great. That's one of the things that we're doing.
Yeah.
The reason why I bring that up is because we're trying to build the world's first insurance company for moms and women. But we can't do it the way the industry's always done, which is, hey, what's the cost of customer acquisition? Let's spend money on this. Let's do branding.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do Facebook. Let's do this and that. And then we'll have some margin and we'll sell the policy, and voila, rinse, repeat 28 million times again. It's not the way I want this company to be set in the right direction to execute, which is why we said, let's have the mom and the woman right in the middle and ask her questions. What can we do to make your life easier? Is it? So therefore, outside of our mission and vision is our goals. Like, either we help you save money, we help you make more money, we help you protect your money, or we improve your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Those 4 pillars, everything we will ever do has to solve at least one of those pillars. So what that does is it creates regimentation in new product development. And stop me at any time if this becomes too business school.
I it's not business schooly at all. I like it because you're saying there's a backdrop and a place that there is a target by which we're measuring everything. And if it doesn't kind of make it through the screening of like, did it solve for one of these things, then we're losing our mission and we're getting all over the place. And so let's stay focused on our customer. But then you started talking about customer, cost of customer acquisition. How do you acquire customers? What's your strategy on that?
Yeah, so we acquire customers many different ways. We have a very successful television campaign. Because we use data to find those channels and areas where women and moms are seeking out information or sometimes getting entertainment off their busy days, busy hours. And so we're using television. We have a composite. One thing we don't do clearly is we don't raise money from our investors to give it to Zuckerberg or Larry Page. What we don't want to do is play that game because it's not who we are. We have a mission, we have a story arc. And you can only do that on podcasts with hosts that understand and resonate. Anna Faris is someone that we respect tremendously. I think she was from Seattle as well. She's a Hollywood actress and a mother of 2, I believe, young children. And, we advertise on podcasts. We partner with podcasters. And then we have television channels. And then we also do some interesting things. We advertise in the physician channel. We do all kinds of interesting things because our mission is moms and women.
I have an idea for you. I actually have an idea. This might not even work, but I'm like, oh, I should connect you. You might already know her. But I was thinking you should be doing some sort of partnering maybe with Jill Angelo from Genève. She's been on my podcast, and I'll connect you guys if it makes sense. But
I'd welcome it.
She's got a company that does education and now has a product around menopause. Which is just like this, it's like such an underserved, but every woman, half of the universe.
Yep.
eventually goes through menopause. And it's like nobody was targeting that group and educating that group on symptoms and how to get educated. And she's building quite the business. So she might be an interesting one.
I would just love to meet her and
she's great.
how she's solving problems.
Yeah, she would be a good one.
Well, you mentioned something interesting that, so we looked at this market space. Geico was started to serve government employees. As you know, government employees insurance company is what Geico stands for. Warren Buffett witnessed the power of serving a segmented population. Like, I'm going to serve these people. And he saw how Geico was really just doing well for government employees because they tend to be risk averse. They pay their bills on time. They drive safely. Those are great people to insure,
Absolutely.
And it's the most successful company he's ever had. We looked at USAA. As a former investment banker, I love comparables. And so a comparable for us when we launched this with my teammates was USAA, a wonderful, amazing platform for insurance and financial services for the military. But combined together, from their origin was maybe 4.5% of population. So when my teammates, my founding teammates and my wife and all of us were looking at this organically, but then we also had to sort of sandwich it with like analysis and market strategies and market entry analyses. And we looked at this and said, what's the largest affinity group in the world? Women. Women and moms are 51% of population.
And aren't they like 80 something percent of the decision making on any sort of purchases?
Yes.
Right.
So, absolutely. So if you multiplex that information and get that signal together, what you see is the fact that you scratch your head and say, how come no one built this yet? Like, how come no one's built an amazing multi-line insurance company for women and moms? And so that's when we knew we were onto something. We're like, someone's got, the universe doesn't like voids. There's oftentimes law of physics or theorem of physics, like there is no void, like the universe wants to fill that void. And so by golly, that's what we're trying to fill that void and do it in a constructive manner. We don't care if someone buys life insurance from us or not. We honestly, my investors might not like me saying this publicly, but for me, it's more important for people to understand the mission of what we're trying to solve for, which is recognizing women and moms and their contribution and the tremendous workload that they have. We are trying to build services that help ameliorate any pain points that they have.
Yeah.
And from that, if they feel comfortable with our brand, then if they want to choose to find well-priced, great A-rated products, then they can get it from us. It's kind of like you buy from people you trust first and not just based on price.
Right.
Do I trust this team? Yeah. Okay. Why? Because they're keeping my, vaccination records for my children.
Absolutely. And very mission driven and very focused and clearly a very smart team. I'm excited for what you're building and I love hearing about all the growth. How are you finding time? I know we kind of touched on it. You got the guitar, you got the 3 kids, we got COVID. How are you finding time to have some self-care and kind of unwind outside of work, as far as like just on a random Saturday? Are you able to spend time with the kids or get some alone time?
So again, I'm not like most guests you've had. Your guest list is amazing and very impressive. My downtime is actually doing the dishes manually with my headphones on and listening to podcasts of various different things. Various different topics. Just like,
yeah.
I love diversity.
I like to do that too. And I now have started to do Audible.
Yeah.
And I actually just downloaded the Lenny Kravitz new book.
Yes.
Which I'm really excited about. I know that you're, Mr. Musician, so I wanted to share that one with you.
Yeah,
what would you say, Chirag, ultimately fuels you? I always ask that at the end of the podcast. I feel like I'm getting to know you well enough to know I kind of have a sense, but I'm curious what you would say to that answer. Question.
Sure. No, great question. Shauna, I think what fuels me is really simply, I want to help make the world better, but I can't do it by being quote unquote a do-gooder. Like, I don't think that's scalable in a sense. For me, I have a certain set of talents. I know that sounds like a movie star, Liam Neeson or someone in some movie. I'm sure I've heard it somewhere. I'm just repeating here. I have a certain set of skills and talents. I want to scalably apply that to make the world better, because you have children, I have children. This is a beautiful world. It's a beautiful country. Can we do something using the structures we have in place, transparency, openness, capitalism, respect for people's rights, all that stuff? Can we do something better? And I do believe that conscious capitalism is a very effective, scalable tool for me to make a better impact.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Thank you. And at the end of the day, I said to myself, could I have been an astronaut? What could I have done there? Well, am I making more potentially better impact through conscious capitalism than if I had been an astronaut? And so that way I feel comfortable with myself, like, hey, I never became an astronaut. Yeah, but that's okay, because I'm actually doing things at scale that's probably more positively impacting the world now.
Yeah. I can see, I think it's easier to be a CEO than an astronaut. I just watched the show on Netflix, Away. I don't know if you've seen it, but if you're an astronaut, like wannabe, watch it. It's Hilary Swank. Did you see it?
Yes. No, I haven't seen it. I know.
I have to say, I did get a little claustrophobia. I don't think I could imagine being like stuck inside. Like, that's incredible that that's even on your docket, that like, maybe I could have been an astronaut. That never crossed my mind, to be an astronaut.
I don't have fear. I guess one of the things is, like, I was dropped a lot as a child, I think, because the way I am wired. I don't have fear. Like, yeah. I honestly don't. I've jumped out of airplanes. I've done all kinds of things. I don't have fear. And I think maybe it's just naivete, or just I've been dropped a lot, but I'm not fearful. I'm not fear driven. I'm objective driven. Like, how can it be done? Sometimes when people say, you need to do 10 pull-ups to make it through this fitness test, and I was looked at like, who did the most? Like, what was the highest number?
Yeah, because that's a possibility. That means that's possible.
Right. Someone did it. Okay. Could I try to get close to that? At least it's motivational.
Yeah.
And so I try to tell my teammates that as well. And I will tell you something funny about our insurance industry. You know how the fastest way to get all the delicious shrimp cocktails at a dinner party is? You tell someone you work in the insurance industry, and they'll literally just turn around and go away, and you can have all the delicious shrimp cocktail you want in the entire.
Because do they think you're going to try to sell them?
No, it's just that their mind just goes like, it's not sexy. It's just like,
yeah,
oh, okay.
It's a little dry. It's a little dry. But we're all going to live, and we're all going to die, and we all need it. So
y'all need it.
Better to be educated about it.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so we're really grateful. A couple of things we do on our team. Our team, as you know, you're in the HR space. You have a fabulous executive search firm. There's 4 things that we do in our team when we bring people on. 4 pillars are very simple. Teamwork. Teamwork is our number one. I can't do anything without my amazing teammates, and I would love to add more. In data, we trust. Because everybody has biases and heuristics and things like that, particularly with us recognizing that all have biases. Let's get them out on the table. But data we trust. Radical transparency. And it's because, in teams, people, you'd be shocked, or maybe you wouldn't be shocked, because you're a business owner too and a team builder, like politics and
like hoarding information or taking credit.
It only takes 2 people to do that.
Yeah, like, it doesn't fly. Yeah.
And so I said, we're not going to have that. We're going to have radical transparency, teamwork, and in data we trust. And then the 4th pillar is just ownership. Like, you own it. Like, this is I trust you. You're going to build a campaign on, this thing, or you're going to give me the analysis and we're going to execute on that. And I think that's what helps people retain and enjoy their work, is those 4 things for me.
Absolutely.
Pillars.
Those are very easy to grasp. I think sometimes companies overcomplicate these things, and yours are very tangible and measurable. It's like they're either going to be a fit for you or not, and believe in your mission or not, and it'll be really easy for you to continue to build an incredible company. I love what you're building, and I'm super grateful to have you on, and hope to see you in like the real world at some point.
Love soon.
Stay safe, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks, Chirag. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean. Likewise.
Thank you for listening to the What Fuels You podcast. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify, and follow us on social media to keep up with the latest news and episodes. You can also contact us at podcast@fueltalent.com to provide feedback, ask questions, and share topics or guests you would like us to cover in the future. We hope you feel inspired by our guests and that we have helped fuel your day. Join us next time for another episode of What Fuels You.